At first, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Every night she let him climb into bed, his body warm against hers, his breath steady as they drifted off together. It started with small touches, innocent, comforting. But then something changed. Her body began to feel different, weaker, drained. She couldn't explain it, but every morning she woke up feeling worse. And months later, when she finally discovered the shocking truth, it was nothing like she had imagined. Emma Carter took a deep breath as she turned the key and stepped into her new apartment. The space was modest but modern, with warm wooden floors and large windows that bathed the room in natural light. It was hers, the first home she had ever owned after years of renting cramped spaces with roommates. She should have felt proud, excited even, but as she placed the last of her moving boxes down, a strange feeling crept over her. The silence. For the first time in years, there was no background chatter, no footsteps in the hallway, no laughter from a shared living room, just an empty apartment and the distant hum of city traffic outside. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on her. She had longed for independence, but she hadn't expected loneliness to come with it. By the next morning, she had made up her mind. She needed companionship. A new friend. A week later, Emma found herself at Sunridge Animal Shelter, walking past rows of eager, barking dogs. She had always loved dogs, but had never been in a position to own one before. Now she had space. Now she could provide a home. As she moved past the kennels, she noticed a German shepherd sitting quietly in the back of his enclosure. While the other dogs barked for attention, he simply watched. His deep brown eyes met hers, unreadable but calm. Emma knelt down, extending a hand. Max hesitated, then slowly approached, sniffing her fingers before pressing his head lightly against her palm. "I'll take him," she said without hesitation. Settling in. She had read that rescue dogs sometimes took weeks to adjust. But, to her surprise, Max settled in much faster than she expected. Within days, he had found his favorite spot on the couch and learned the exact time Emma came home from work. He was quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal. At night, she set up a dog bed near her bedroom door, giving him his own space. The first night, he curled up on the bed obediently, his body rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. The first time. On the third night, something changed. Emma woke up to warmth against her legs. Confused, she shifted slightly and realized Max was on the bed. She frowned. She was sure she had left him on his bed near the door. "Max," she murmured sleepily. "Down." The dog lifted his head, looking at her with those same calm brown eyes, before sighing and slowly climbing off the bed, retreating back to his own spot. Emma shook her head with a small smile before drifting back to sleep. A habit forms. By the fifth night, Max was back. This time he had waited until she was fully asleep before making his move. She sighed. "Seriously, Max?" Emma groaned, rubbing her face. She should make him go back to his own bed. She should enforce the rule. But looking at him, at the way his body fit so naturally against the bed, the way his presence made the room feel safer, she just didn't have the heart to do it. "Fine," she muttered, "but no hogging the blankets." Max gave a contented sigh, resting his head back down. And just like that, the habit was formed. At first it was subtle. Emma would wake up feeling a little groggy, rubbing her temples as a dull headache settled at the base of her skull. Nothing too concerning, just the usual morning fog, she told herself. Maybe she needed to cut back on late-night Netflix binges. But as the days passed, the grogginess didn't fade. It worsened. She began waking up feeling drained, as though she hadn't slept at all. Her limbs felt heavier, her movements sluggish. By midday, a wave of exhaustion would hit, forcing her to lean against her desk at work, blinking hard to stay focused. Her boss even commented on it during a meeting. "You okay, Emma? You look exhausted." She forced a smile. Just didn't sleep well last night. Except she had. She had gone to bed at her usual time, curled under the covers with Max at her feet, his steady breathing lulling her to sleep, and yet every morning she felt worse. Max's strange behavior. At first she chalked it up to stress. Work had been demanding lately. Maybe her body was just reacting to the pressure. But then she noticed something that made her pause. Max wasn't himself either. Normally lively and alert, he now seemed sluggish, sleeping more during the day, moving slower when she took him on walks. He still followed her everywhere, still curled up on her bed at night. But his energy was different. And then there was the breathing. At night, Max's breath sounded heavier, almost labored. Sometimes he let out small coughs, barely noticeable, but enough for Emma to register in her half-asleep state. Other times, he would give a low whimper, shifting restlessly before settling down again. Was he sick? Emma knelt beside him one evening, running her hands through his fur. He felt warm but not hot. His nose was damp, his eyes clear, no fever, no immediate signs of illness. "Maybe you caught a cold, buddy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "Or maybe you're just getting used to the new place." She convinced herself it was nothing serious. But when Sarah saw her a few days later, she wasn't convinced. Sarah's concern. Sarah Mitchell had been Emma's best friend since college. They had seen each other through breakups, job changes, and everything in between. So when Sarah walked into their usual coffee shop and stared at Emma, her brows knitting together in concern, Emma knew she was about to get an earful. "You look like shit." Emma rolled her eyes. "Good morning to you too." Sarah didn't smile. She took a sip of her coffee, still watching Emma like a mother about to scold her child. "I'm serious. Have you looked at yourself? You've lost weight. Your skin looks pale. Are you eating properly?" Emma frowned, running a hand through her hair. I guess I haven't had much of an appetite lately." Sarah set her cup down with a thud. "Emma, that's not normal. And the dark circles under your eyes? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "I have been sleeping," Emma muttered, stirring her latte absently. "That's the weird thing. I should feel rested, but I wake up exhausted. Like bone-deep exhaustion." Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Have you gone to a doctor?" Emma scoffed. "Sarah, it's probably just work stress." Sarah didn't look convinced. "Work stress doesn't make you lose weight, feel like a zombie, and look like a damn ghost." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Wait, didn't you say Max hasn't been himself either?" Emma hesitated. "Yeah, he's been acting weird too, sleeping more, breathing a little heavier." Sarah pursed her lips. "And that doesn't seem suspicious to you? You and your dog both feeling like crap?" Emma's stomach twisted slightly. She hadn't thought about it like that. Sure, she had noticed Max acting differently, but she had assumed it was just coincidence. Dogs get tired too, right? But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if something was actually wrong? Brushing it off. Despite Sarah's concern, Emma still hesitated to make an appointment. The idea of going to a doctor, getting poked and prodded just to be told it was stress, didn't exactly sound appealing. So she tried to brush it off. She made small changes, went to bed earlier, drank more water, took Max on extra long walks, thinking maybe fresh air would help both of them feel better. But nothing worked. If anything, she started feeling worse. Some mornings, she woke up with a dull pressure in her chest, like someone had been pressing down on it all night. Other times, her head spun when she stood up too quickly. Her exhaustion started affecting everything. She missed texts from friends. She started zoning out at work, barely making it through meetings without fighting the urge to rest her head on the desk. Even her appetite had disappeared entirely. It was as if her body was shutting down bit by bit. And Max? He was barely moving some mornings. Instead of his usual enthusiastic stretches and tail wags when she woke up, he would stay curled up, only lifting his head slightly when she called his name. A flicker of fear settled in Emma's gut. Something was definitely wrong. The breaking point. One night, Emma collapsed onto the couch, utterly drained. Max lay at her feet, unmoving, his breathing slow and heavy. She felt her own chest rise and fall in sync with his, and for a brief moment, the strangest thought crossed her mind. What if we're both sick? What if it's something in this apartment? Except Sarah had been right. It was too much of a coincidence that both she and Max had started deteriorating at the exact same time. And as she lay there, eyelids growing heavy, she swore she heard something, a faint hissing noise coming from the direction of the heater. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned her head slightly, eyes locking onto the metal vent near the floor. The apartment had central heating, something she hadn't paid much attention to. Had it always made that sound? She wasn't sure, but as she drifted into unconsciousness, one thought kept echoing in her mind. Something is wrong. Emma sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual as she glanced at Max in the back seat. He lay curled up, his head resting against the seat, his breathing slow and steady. Normally, a car ride would excite him. He'd stick his head out the window, ears flapping in the wind, tail wagging. But today he barely reacted. She pressed her foot to the gas pedal and headed towards Dr. Robert Hayes' clinic, hoping for answers. The veterinary clinic was small but well kept, the scent of disinfectant lingering in the air as Emma walked through the glass doors with Max by her side. The receptionist, a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes, smiled warmly. "Hey there, Emma." And Max. Emma had been coming here for the past month to get Max's initial vaccinations and checkups after adopting him. But today felt different. "Of course, you can go right in," Marla said, nodding toward the familiar examination room down the hall. Emma swallowed hard and led Max inside. Dr. Robert Hayes was a tall man in his 40s with sharp blue eyes and an air of calm confidence. He had a no-nonsense approach to his work, something Emma appreciated. He didn't sugarcoat things, but he also never made pet owners panic unnecessarily. As he entered the room, he gave her a small nod. "Emma, what's going on with Max?" She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "He's been different, sleeping more, less energy, sometimes breathing heavier than usual, and, I don't know, something just feels off." Dr. Hayes knelt beside Max, running his hands gently along the dog's body, feeling for anything abnormal. Max barely reacted, which made Emma's stomach twist. "Has he been eating normally?" Hayes asked. Emma hesitated. "Mostly, but not as much as before, and he's just not himself." The vet nodded, continuing his exam. He checked Max's eyes, ears, gums, listened to his heartbeat, took his temperature. The room was quiet except for the steady tick-tick-tick of the wall clock. Finally, Hayes stood up, his brows furrowed slightly. "Max shows signs of mild toxicity," he said. Emma's stomach dropped. "Toxicity? From what?" "I don't know yet," Hayes admitted. "His vitals are stable, but his fatigue, sluggishness, and minor respiratory changes suggest low-level poisoning. It's not severe. If it were, he'd be much worse by now. But something in his system isn't right." Emma felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. She had been worried about Max, but what really unnerved her was the fact that she felt the same way. Her hands tightened into fists. "I've been feeling sick too," she blurted out. Dr. Hayes's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" "I've been exhausted for weeks," she admitted, "waking up more tired than when I went to bed. Headaches, weakness, just drained. And it's been getting worse. But Max and I both started feeling bad around the same time." Dr. Hayes narrowed his eyes. He leaned back slightly, arms crossed over his chest as he considered her words. "That's not a coincidence," he said finally. "You and Max share the same space. If both of you are experiencing symptoms, it's likely something environmental." Emma's heartbeat quickened. "You mean something in my apartment?" Dr. Hayes nodded. "It's possible." He tapped his fingers against the side of the exam table, thinking. "If it was food poisoning, I'd expect digestive issues. If it was seasonal allergies, the symptoms would come and go. But this sounds more like prolonged exposure to something." Emma swallowed. The idea of something in her home, something unseen, something quietly making both her and Max sick, made her skin prickle. "What should I do?" she asked, voice quieter now. "For Max, I'll run some blood tests to check for any toxins," Hayes said. "But for you, you should see a doctor. Get blood work done. If your symptoms match his, that could give us a huge clue about what's happening." Emma nodded, though the thought of going to the doctor made her uneasy. She had assumed her exhaustion was stress, had convinced herself it would go away if she just got more rest. But if it wasn't? Waiting for answers. Emma sat in the waiting area while Dr. Hayes took Max to draw blood. Her foot tapped against the floor, her mind racing. What if this was serious? What if she had been slowly poisoning herself without even knowing? Sarah's voice echoed in her head. "You and your dog both feeling sick?" "That's not normal, Emma." She exhaled sharply and pulled out her phone. After a few seconds of hesitation, she dialed her doctor's office. A receptionist answered. "Hi, this is Emma Carter," she said, shifting in her seat. "I'd like to schedule an appointment. Something's not right, and I think I need some tests done." She felt a little ridiculous saying it out loud. She wasn't a hypochondriac. She had never been the type to run to the doctor over a little fatigue. But this wasn't normal. She needed to find out what was happening to her body, and she needed to find out fast. By the time Emma and Max left the vet clinic, the sun was beginning to set. The air was cool, the sky a pale gold fading into dusky blue. Max walked beside her, his steps slow but steady. She opened the car door for him, watching as he climbed in with less enthusiasm than usual. The drive home was quiet. For the first time since moving into her new apartment, Emma felt uneasy about returning. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, a thought nagged at her. If Dr. Hayes was right, if something in her home was making her and Max sick, what was it? She turned on the lights. Everything looked normal, nothing seemed out of place, but the uneasiness lingered. That night, as she lay in bed with Max curled at her feet, her body felt heavier than ever. Her eyelids drooped, her limbs tingled, and as she drifted into an exhausted, almost dreamlike sleep, the last thing she registered was the faint, barely audible hissing coming from the heater vent. Emma's exhaustion had started as an inconvenience, a grogginess she could shake off with a strong cup of coffee. But now it was a constant weight, pressing down on her like an invisible force. She could no longer ignore it. "Emma?" Her head jerked up. Her manager was standing at her desk, concern evident in his expression. "You've been out of it all morning," he said. "Are you feeling okay?" She nodded weakly. "Yeah, just a little tired." His frown deepened. "You sure? You don't look great." She forced a smile. "I'll be fine." But as soon as he walked away, she felt a wave of dizziness hit her, forcing her to grip the edge of the desk. It wasn't just exhaustion anymore. Something was seriously wrong. Max's decline. Max had always been Emma's shadow, following her from room to room, tail wagging, ears perked up with curiosity. Now he barely moved. Instead of greeting her at the door when she got home, he would lift his head half-heartedly, then let it drop again. His tail, which once wagged enthusiastically at the sound of her voice, now only gave a weak flick before falling still. Even when she offered his favorite treats, he sniffed them, then turned away. That scared her. A dog that refused food was a dog in distress. She had been waiting for Max's blood test results to come back, hoping they would offer some kind of explanation. But with each passing day, his condition mirrored hers more and more. Was it something they were both exposed to? Her stomach twisted at the thought. And then came the night that made everything worse. The night of the warning. Emma was in bed, curled under the covers, the familiar weight of fatigue pressing against her limbs. Max was lying at the foot of the bed as he always did. But then he moved. Not sluggishly the way he had been lately, but suddenly, urgently. A second later he barked, short, sharp and loud. Emma groaned, barely opening her eyes. "Max, not now!" Another bark, louder. And then she felt it. A tug at her blanket. She blinked awake, barely registering the sight of Max's teeth gently gripping the fabric, pulling at it with surprising force. He was trying to pull her out of bed. "Max, stop!" She tried to push him away, but he let out a frantic whimper, something desperate in his eyes. He tugged again, his entire body tense. It was the most energy she had seen from him in days, but she was too exhausted to react. Her body felt impossibly heavy, her head throbbing. She wanted to sit up, to get out of bed, but her limbs wouldn't cooperate. Then, just as suddenly as he had started, Max staggered back, panting. His legs trembled, and with a weak whine he collapsed onto the floor beside the bed. Emma's vision swam. Something was wrong. Max had tried to warn her, but she was too weak to listen. And then darkness took over. Sarah's visit. The next morning, Emma barely had the strength to roll out of bed. She stumbled to the bathroom, gripping the counter as she stared at her reflection. She looked awful. Her skin was pale, her cheeks sunken. Dark circles framed her eyes, making her appear haunted. She splashed water on her face, but it did little to shake the overwhelming heaviness weighing down her body. And Max, he was still lying near the bed, unmoving. His chest rose and fell, but it was shallow, uneven. Emma's heart clenched. She reached for her phone with trembling hands and texted Sarah, "Come over, please." Sarah arrived an hour later, letting herself in with the spare key. The moment she stepped inside, she froze. The apartment smelled off. It wasn't a strong smell, not something noticeable right away. But there was a staleness to the air, something artificial and wrong. Then she saw Emma. Her best friend was slumped on the couch, looking like a shell of herself. "Jesus, Emma!" Sarah gasped, rushing forward. She pressed a hand to Emma's forehead, cold, clammy. Then she noticed Max. The dog didn't even lift his head. Sarah's chest tightened. "This isn't normal," she said firmly. "You need to get out of here." Emma shook her head weakly. I just need rest." Sarah's patience snapped. "No, Emma, you look like you're dying, and Max, look at him, he's barely moving." Emma tried to protest, but Sarah wasn't having it. She grabbed her by the arm. "We're leaving, now." Emma resisted, but she was too weak to fight back, and in that moment she knew. Sarah was right. If she stayed here any longer, something bad was going to happen. But what neither of them realized yet was that it already had. Emma sat in the cold, sterile office, her hands resting in her lap, fingers twisting together as she waited. The faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, mixing with the distant murmurs of nurses beyond the door. She felt lightheaded, her body heavy with exhaustion, but at least she was here, finally doing something about it. Dr. Patel, a middle-aged man with a calm, reassuring presence, walked in holding a folder. He sat across from her, flipping through the pages, before finally meeting her gaze. "Your blood work came back mostly normal," he said, his voice even. Emma blinked. "Mostly?" He exhaled softly, tapping his pen against the folder. "You're showing some signs of oxygen deprivation and mild toxicity exposure, but nothing immediately alarming. Your red blood cell count is slightly off, and there are markers of prolonged fatigue. Have you recently been exposed to chemicals or lived near an industrial site?" She frowned. "No, just my apartment." Dr. Patel nodded. "I'm not saying this is life-threatening, but something is affecting your body's ability to function properly. Your symptoms, chronic fatigue, dizziness, nausea, difficulty concentrating, are consistent with low-level poisoning. It could be something environmental." Emma's stomach twisted. "You mean something in my home is making me sick?" "It's a possibility," he said. "Have you noticed any strange smells? Gas? Mold? Anything unusual?" She thought about it. At first, nothing came to mind. But then, Max. Dr. Patel must have noticed her reaction because he leaned forward slightly. "Emma, I strongly recommend having your apartment checked. This could be something as simple as faulty ventilation or a gas leak. It's better to be safe than sorry." She nodded, suddenly desperate to get out of there, to go home and figure this out. The moment she stepped into her apartment, a strange uneasiness settled over her. She had been living here for months, but now, knowing what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Max, who had been staying at Sarah's house for the night, wasn't there to greet her. The silence felt oppressive. Without him, the space felt colder, emptier. Then she remembered what had been nagging at her. Max had been fixated on certain areas, specifically the kitchen near the gas stove and her bedroom corner near the heater. She crouched down, running her fingers along the edge of the gas line, pressing her palm against the vent. Nothing felt abnormal, no strong smell of gas, nothing obvious. But she wasn't going to take any chances. Pulling out her phone, she scrolled through her contacts and called the first person that came to mind. "Hello?" A deep voice answered after 2 rings. "Hi, is this Jake Morgan?" "Yeah, speaking." "This is Emma Carter," she said quickly. "Sarah gave me your number. She said you're a home safety inspector." "That's right," he confirmed. "What's going on?" Emma took a breath. "I need my apartment checked. Now." Jake arrived within the hour. A tall, no-nonsense man in his late 30s, he wore a navy work shirt with his company logo embroidered on the chest. His expression was serious as he stepped inside, carrying a black toolkit and a portable gas detector. "Tell me everything," he said. Emma quickly summarized the past few weeks, her exhaustion, Max's symptoms, the doctor's suggestion about environmental toxins. Jake listened carefully, nodding. "I'll run a full check. Let's start with the basics. Carbon monoxide, gas leaks, mold. If something's wrong here, we'll find it." He pulled out his gas detector, a small handheld device with a digital screen, and walked toward the kitchen first. Emma followed closely behind, heart pounding. Jake ran the scanner along the stove, the gas lines, and the wall. Nothing. "All clear here," he muttered. "No leaks." Emma exhaled, relieved but also more confused than before. If it wasn't gas, then what? Jake moved to the bedroom next, kneeling by the heater vent. He placed the sensor against the grate and waited. The device beeped softly, the numbers on the screen flickering. Then a sharp, prolonged beep. Jake's head snapped up, his brows furrowed as he read the screen. "Emma," he said carefully, "you've got a problem." Her breath caught. "What is it?" He turned the screen toward her. "Carbon monoxide, low but constant exposure." Her stomach dropped. She had heard of carbon monoxide poisoning before, people dying in their sleep because of silent leaks, entire families succumbing to the odorless, colorless gas. Jake stood up, his expression serious. "This explains everything. Your symptoms, Max's fatigue. Carbon monoxide poisoning happens over time if it's a slow leak. It's why you've been feeling worse every day instead of all at once." Emma's knees felt weak. "How bad is it?" He adjusted the settings on his device, scanning the air near the vent again. "It's not at deadly levels, but it's definitely above what's safe. Long-term exposure can cause major health issues, neurological damage, organ stress, even death if it builds up." Her hands clenched into fists. "I had no idea." Jake's jaw tightened. "Most people don't. That's the danger. It's invisible." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. All this time, she had been breathing it in night after night, and Max had been suffering too. If she hadn't gotten checked, if she hadn't called Jake, how much longer would it have taken before it was too late? She swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Jake was already pulling out his phone. "First, open all your windows. Get fresh air in here. I'm calling a specialist to shut down your heating system and fix the leak. Until then, do not sleep here." Emma nodded, her hands trembling as she grabbed her coat. She felt stupid for not realizing it sooner. But as she stepped outside, inhaling the crisp, clean air, she realized how lucky she was. If she had ignored it any longer, if Max hadn't been there to warn her in his own way, she might never have woken up. Jake wasted no time. Within minutes of detecting the carbon monoxide leak, he was on the phone with a heating specialist, arranging for an immediate repair. Emma stood nearby, still shaken, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, as she tried to process everything. Her home, the place she had felt safest, had been slowly poisoning her. "Emma, you need to stay somewhere else tonight," Jake said firmly, tucking his phone back into his pocket. "I don't care if you crack every window in this place. It's not safe until the leak is sealed." She nodded, exhaling shakily. "I'll go to Sarah's." "And Max?" "I left him with her this morning. Thank God." Jake gave a small nod of approval before gesturing toward her coat. "Grab what you need. Let's get out of here." Emma didn't hesitate. She packed an overnight bag in record time, double-checking that her most important belongings were with her before following Jake out the door. As they stepped outside, the cool night air filled her lungs, fresh and clean, free from the invisible toxin that had nearly killed her. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe properly. The repair process. The next day, the heating specialist arrived. Emma stood beside Jake, arms wrapped around herself as the technician, a gruff, older man named Tom, knelt beside the heater vent, dismantling a section of the piping. He worked silently for a few minutes before letting out a low whistle. "Well, there's your problem," he muttered. Jake crouched beside him. "What are we looking at?" Tom pointed to a small crack in the heat exchanger. "This thing's been leaking CO for a while. Not a huge amount, but enough to make you sick over time. Surprised it wasn't caught during the last inspection." Emma's stomach churned. I never got it inspected when I moved in." Jake shot her a look. "Emma," she groaned, running a hand through her hair. I know, I should have, but I never thought—" "Most people don't," Tom cut in, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're lucky you caught it before it got worse. I've seen cases where people don't wake up." Emma shivered. She didn't need the reminder. She already knew how close she had come. Tom continued his work, replacing the damaged parts and sealing the leak properly. Jake, meanwhile, installed a carbon monoxide detector near the bedroom and another one in the hallway. "This thing will go off if CO levels start rising again," he explained, tightening the last screw. "No more guessing. If it beeps, you get out." Emma nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, Jake," she said softly. He gave her a lopsided grin. "Hey, I like keeping my clients alive." A noticeable change. Emma stayed with Sarah for another 2 nights while her apartment aired out. By the time she finally returned, the difference was immediate. She woke up the next morning feeling refreshed, her body lighter than it had in weeks. The crushing fatigue, the headaches, the dizziness, gone. She stretched in bed, inhaling deeply, marveling at the simple absence of exhaustion. This was how she was supposed to feel. She hadn't realized just how bad it had gotten until now. As she sat up, movement at the foot of the bed caught her eye. Max. He was awake, too, fully alert, his ears perked, tail thumping against the mattress. His eyes sparkled with energy, a stark contrast to the lifeless gaze he had worn for weeks. "Morning, buddy," she murmured, reaching out to scratch his head. Max let out a playful huff and suddenly jumped off the bed, trotting toward the door, his body bouncing with excitement. Emma laughed, feeling her chest lighten for the first time in what felt like forever. Max was back, she was back, and it felt incredible. A wake-up call. Later that day, she sat on the floor of her living room, tossing a ball for Max. He sprinted after it, skidding slightly before pouncing on his prize, tail wagging furiously. Watching him, Emma felt a lump form in her throat. If it hadn't been for him, if he hadn't been acting strangely, if he hadn't been sniffing around the gas lines, if he hadn't tried to wake her that night, would she have ever figured it out? Would she still be lying in bed, wasting away, until one day she simply didn't wake up? The thought terrified her. She set the ball down and called Max over. He trotted up to her, panting happily, and flopped down beside her with a satisfied grunt. Emma wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "Thank you," she whispered. Max didn't understand the words, but he leaned into her touch, licking her cheek with a happy wag of his tail. He had saved her life, and she would never, ever take that for granted again. A new routine. That night, as Emma settled into bed, she glanced at the carbon monoxide detector near the door. A small green light blinked steadily, assuring her that the air was safe. Max, as always, curled up beside her, his body warm against her legs. She smiled, reaching down to scratch his ears. "You're still sleeping here, huh?" she teased. Max let out a content sigh and stretched out further, claiming more space than necessary. Emma chuckled. "Fine, you win." As she closed her eyes, she felt something she hadn't in weeks. Peace. She was safe. Max was safe. And she would never ignore the small signs again, because sometimes those small signs, they save lives. The days after Emma's recovery felt strangely different. Everything seemed clearer, as if she had been walking through a fog for weeks and had only just stepped into the sunlight. Her energy had returned completely, her mind sharper, her body lighter. She could breathe deeply without feeling like she was carrying a weight on her chest. And Max was himself again, bounding across the apartment with boundless enthusiasm, his eyes bright, his tail wagging constantly. Watching him run through the park, chasing after squirrels and barking excitedly at passing dogs, Emma felt a sense of overwhelming gratitude. She had come so close to missing this, to missing everything. Realizing the danger. It had taken one conversation with Jake for reality to truly sink in. "You don't realize how lucky you are," he had told her. "Most people don't figure out carbon monoxide poisoning until it's too late. It's called the silent killer for a reason." Emma shuddered. "I don't even want to think about what would have happened if Max hadn't been acting strange." Jake leaned against his truck, arms crossed. "You should tell people about this. How many of your friends even have CO detectors?" Emma hesitated. She hadn't thought about that. "Probably not enough," she admitted. "You could have died, Emma," Jake said bluntly. "And if you hadn't gotten out when you did, Max would have gone with you." That thought hit her like a punch to the gut. She looked down at Max, who was sitting at her feet, looking up at her with his usual quiet devotion. She had almost lost him, or worse, he had almost lost her. Emma clenched her fists. She couldn't change what happened, but maybe she could prevent it from happening to someone else. Spreading awareness. The next day, Emma pulled out her laptop and started typing. She posted on social media, telling her story in honest detail. How she had ignored the signs, how she had blamed stress, how she had almost died in her sleep without ever realizing it. If you're reading this and you don't have a carbon monoxide detector in your home, get one. Right now. It might just save your life. She attached a photo of Max, captioned, "This dog saved my life. Pay attention to your pets. Sometimes they know things before we do." Within hours, the post had hundreds of shares. Messages flooded in. Friends texted her saying they had just ordered CO detectors. Strangers commented about how they had never even thought about checking their heating systems. For the first time, Emma felt like something good had come out of this nightmare. She had almost lost everything. But now, she was making sure no one else did. A new perspective. That night, Emma sat on her couch, Max curled beside her. She ran her fingers through his fur absent-mindedly, feeling his steady warmth, his slow, rhythmic breathing. She had always loved him. From the moment she saw him at the shelter, she knew he was special. But now he was more than just a dog. He was her lifeline. "Guess I owe you one, huh?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. Max gave her a contented sigh, shifting closer, pressing against her side. Emma smiled. She had bought this apartment, hoping to build a home. And now, with Max at her side, she realized she already had everything she needed. A week later, Emma went to the animal shelter where she had first adopted Max. Not to adopt another dog, but to donate. She dropped off a box of CO detectors, handing them to the shelter manager. "Give one to every new adopter," she said. "Make sure they know." The woman looked at her, surprised, then smiled warmly. "Thank you, Emma. That's a great idea." As Emma walked back to her car, Max trotting beside her, she felt lighter. What had once been a terrifying experience had now turned into something meaningful. She had survived. And because of Max, she was making sure others would too. As she started the car and pulled onto the road, Max poked his head out the window, tongue lolling in the wind, a picture of pure joy. Emma laughed. Yes, this was a new beginning. Emma had learned a lesson she would never forget. Sometimes the things we can't see are the most dangerous. But through it all, one thing remained clear. Love protects. Max had saved her life, not by barking at danger or dragging her out of a fire, but by simply being there, by showing her what she had overlooked. And isn't that what love does? It watches over us. It warns us when we're too blind to see. It stays by our side, even when we don't realize we need saving. This wasn't just a story about survival. It was about faith, trust, and the quiet miracles that happen every day, sometimes in the form of a loyal dog, sometimes in the kindness of a stranger, and sometimes in the whispers of God, guiding us even when we don't understand why. What do you think of Emma and Max's story? Have you ever had a moment when an animal, a friend, or even something unexplainable protected you from unseen danger? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, consider sharing it with someone who might need the reminder. Life is fragile, but love, God's love, always finds a way to save us. God bless you, and may you always be surrounded by the kind of love that watches over you, even in the dark.